Hello everyone, it's Father Hayes along with Allison, and we're doing, back by popular demand, another one of our recommendations. I think most of our videos up to this point have been movie or TV show recommendations to get us through the shutdown or get us through the summer, or video where we just finished was a little bit more about dealing with some of the issues that are very prevalent in our society today. So what I wanted to do in this video is a little bit different in that I want to talk about books.
Sounds great.
Novels specifically, but historical novels. Because again, there's a lot of debate now about our history. And I think part of the problem is a lot of us don't know our history. In fact, Newt Gingrich, former Speaker of the House, before he went into politics, his training was as a historian. And so he has been, his post-Congress career, one of the things he's been doing is trying to really re-energize people's interest in history. And one of the ways he's done that, along with his co-author, William Forstchen, I think is the way you say his name, who himself is a historian and teaches at a college in, I believe, South Carolina, is they have done a number of novels, historical novels. So basically what Newt Gingrich does is he's done two different types of historical novels. One is just straight telling the story of an event. The other one is what he calls active history, and it's where they take an event and then they imagine, well, what if this decision was made instead of the decision that was made historically? What if one fact was changed? What would be the ripple effects of that? And so what he wants to do is also help us understand that history is not stagnant. It's not simply names and dates, but it's active, it's fluid. Things could go in a lot of different ways. So that's one of the things he's done with these novels. But at the same time, they're very entertaining, very informative novels. So if you like to read, if you're looking for some good summer reading, these are ones that I think will help either introduce us to or reintroduce us to a period of our early history of our country, some of the pivotal events of our country and our country's history, and also get us thinking about the what ifs. What if this was different? What if that was different?
So some good historical fiction.
Good historical fiction. But it also, the other thing that he does in this is he really brings some of the key people to life. Who were these people that were caught up in the events, just like, we're getting caught up in events of our current day. What were these people, who were these people who were being, asked to do very big things, maybe things they never imagined they would be asked to do, things that would shape the history of our country, things that would affect the lives of others. So, to start with, he has a wonderful series on the American Revolution, this is in the category of just telling the story. What were the events, and who were some of the key people that shaped those events? So it's a trilogy of novels about the American Revolution. The first is called To Try Men's Souls, and it is about Washington crossing the Potomac and the Battle of Trenton. And this was a very pivotal moment that kept the revolution alive. I have to say, when I read this, I didn't realize how grueling of an experience it was that night. It was raining, it was sleeting, it was miserable, and there would be a million reasons to not do it. And yet, he was able to rally his troops, and they accomplished a really amazing historical feat. But it's also just a very well-written novel, too. I really enjoyed reading it. So, To Try Men's Souls, about the Washington crossing the Potomac and the Battle of Trenton. The next in the series is called Valley Forge, and it is about the winter at Valley Forge. And again, I never realized how grueling of an experience this was. and how easy it would have been for everybody to just give up and go home. And the great leadership that Washington had just in persevering with his men and helping them to persevere, but also within this very difficult winter, forming them into an effective fighting force. So some great character analysis of some of the key figures, but also just a very well written novel. All right, so Valley Forge. And then finally, the third one in the series on the Revolution is Victory at Yorktown. And again, I didn't realize the gamble that Washington took in the way that he altered the course of the fighting, and also how much we relied on the French to help us. So very well done, and some of the characters that are more fictional characters you see through all three books.
Okay.
And so there's also a nice kind of wrapping up of their story as well. But it's woven in with true historical events.
I was going to say, this is also very timely because Hamilton, the Broadway musical,
Mhm.
has gotten so many people more interested in this and more aware of it. So
Yeah.
if you enjoyed that, or even if you haven't seen it, that could be a good connection.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a song about the Battle of Yorktown.
Is there? I did not know that because I have
I'll
not
send it
seen
to you.
Hamilton yet. So am I to do. Now this next novel that I'll recommend is not one of the ones that Newt Gingrich and his co-author wrote, but it's very famous, Pulitzer Prize winning novel about the Battle of Gettysburg in the Civil War, and this is by Michael Shara. Now I think this is the only novel that he did, and now there's a lot of novels that I think it's his son has been writing, kind of picking up where he left off. He did a couple more on the Civil War, he's done a number on the Second World War, one on the war in Mexico, one in the First World
Yeah,
War.
nodding because my dad used to be obsessed with these books.
Okay,
So we have all
yeah.
of them sitting in my house.
And again, the thing I think that's really good about this is it's very well written, telling the story as it happened, but he focuses on key people, historical people, on both sides of the battle, the Union and the Confederacy. And I think, unfortunately, one of the things that's happening in our public dialogue right now is anybody who fought on the side of the Confederacy is caricatured as an evil person who we need to cancel out in our cancel culture. And these were people who were caught up in the situation of their times, and many of the people that fought on either side fought for many different reasons, but they also endured a lot of challenges, a lot of hardship, and because they believed in their cause. And so I think this might be a good way to help us move from discussing current events through sound bites and actually be able to enter into a more informed and lengthy discussion about the issues and about our history. Okay? All right, returning to Newt Gingrich, now we're getting into what he called active history. And this is actually the first series that he wrote. He wrote the Revolution series later.
Mm-hmm.
But this is also called, quite simply, Gettysburg. But what he does here, and he and his co-author actually went to the War College in Carlisle,
Okay.
and they war gamed all these scenarios. So these are very plausible scenarios. They're not something that they just kind of threw in there thinking, well, that sounds good. So it's a very thought out what if, and it changes one significant decision. Because one of the things about the Battle of Gettysburg that some people are familiar with, others may not be, is prior to the Battle of Gettysburg, Robert E. Lee, who was one of the most effective, or not Robert E. Lee, I'm sorry, Stonewall Jackson, who was one of Lee's lieutenants. I think Lee called him his right arm. He could anticipate what Lee needed. He was such an effective leader of his troops. And his death was by an accident. He was accidentally shot by one of his own sentries, his own people on guard duty. And so he was not present at the Battle of Gettysburg. So some people who are very big into Civil War discussions and study would have said there would never have been a Battle of Gettysburg if Jackson was alive, because he would have told Lee, this is not the place, we need to go somewhere else. So what Gingrich does is he says, okay, well, what if Lee actually listened to some of the advice of some of the other generals and changed the plan of action? What are the ripple effects that could take place? And so this becomes a three book series, and goes in some very interesting directions. But at the same time, they're exploring the key figures of the day: Abraham Lincoln, Jefferson Davis, the president of the Confederacy, Robert E. Lee, and also Ulysses S. Grant. So the next book in the series is called Grant Comes East. Grant was fighting in the West and did historically come into the Eastern theater, but under different circumstances in this novel. And so it becomes a bit of a chess match and a cat and mouse game between Lee and Grant, different from the way it historically played out. Again, very well written, very engaging. And that's what Gingrich is trying to do, to get us really interested in the different ways that things could have played out.
So that's the second one.
That's the second one in the series. And the final book in the series is called Never Call Retreat. And that kind of wraps everything up. So these I definitely recommend very much. Now the final one I'll recommend actually has two titles. It was originally released, now this is back to straight history telling the story. And this was originally released called as The Battle of the Crater, which is the way that at least an aspect of the siege of Petersburg, Virginia, was known. So at this point in the war, everything had devolved into trench warfare. So it's very much like what we saw in the First World War. So to try to break the siege, the Union actually tunneled up to the fortifications at Petersburg and packed it with dynamite. And then there was a plan of how to assault once the bomb went off to create a hole in the defenses. But for various reasons that they go into in the novel, that plan went awry. And so now they changed it, and I'm not sure exactly why they changed the novel's name, but now they've changed it to Make Men Free. And I suspect part of the reason is because one of the focuses on this novel, and I believe Gingrich's co-author, William Fortune, did his doctoral dissertation on this battle. But this was where black Union soldiers were being introduced. And there's a whole storyline about not only the use of these soldiers, but the politics on the Union side in the decision to use them or not use them, and how they were used. So this, again, is pretty straight history for us in Virginia. This is part of our history because this took place just a little south from us. But it's very well written, very engaging, and hopefully will spur a deeper interest in our history, a deeper interest in some of the key figures who shaped our history, and a discussion of history that goes beyond tweets and sound bites. All right, so for Allison, this is Father Hayes, wishing you some happy reading over the summer. God bless.